Welcome to the Professional Oasis. I am Dr. Johnette Ruffner-Ceaser, founder of the Professional Oasis and Liberated Expressions, LLC. And I am joined by my fellow Oasis guides, Candy Speight, owner of Order Your Steps, LLC, and Karen Bryant, founder of Bloom Theory Media. And we are so glad that you all are here to join us. Today's episode is an extension of our previous conversation about romantic relationships. And if you watched our last episode, our guest, Rhonda Slade Stanford Boldly, shared her story and her book, The 7 Deadly Sins That Can Ruin a Relationship. And if you have not seen that episode, we encourage you to do so. But today, today we are talking about clarity before commitment. And our special guest is Dr. Sislena Grocer Ledbetter, affectionately known as Dr. Sis, who is the author of The 7 Conversations That You Must Have Before You Say I Do. And listen, if you've ever thought, why didn't we talk about this sooner, or how can I love better next time, this episode is for you. You all, not only is Dr. Sis the author of this life-changing book, she is a behavioral scientist and relationship educator. Dr. Sis spent her career leading, studying, and remaining genuinely curious about relationships of every kind. I mean, the ones we build at work, in our community, and the ones that are most intimate with our romantic partners. And her work sits at the intersection of cultural truth and the kind of straight talk that most relationship books are too polite to offer. And Dr. Sis believes without apology that preparation is the most romantic thing you can do before marriage. You all, please help me to welcome Dr. Sis to the Professional Oasis.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. All of that's me. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Johnette. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all. I'm so excited about the Professional Oasis in this amazing podcast. And thank all of you for this opportunity to share a little bit about the corner of the earth and the corner of the knowledge that I feel like that I know and can offer to people. So thank you, and welcome to your guest. Happy to dig in.
Let me give you a proper applause. There you go.
Let's go.
So let's jump into the meat of the matter. So Dr. Sis, would you start us off with telling us about the book and what led you to write it?
Yes. So, excuse me, y'all. The book is called 7 Conversations You Must Have Before You Say I Do. And they're mostly because they are the 7 conversations I said, I didn't have before I said I do. And I walked into my marriage as someone who had studied human behavior, done the research. In fact, my master's thesis had to do with a lot of this work, understood a lot about what partnerships were supposed to look like. And still, I managed to avoid cleverly most of these conversations deeply. So, we did some of the premarital counseling. We were talking about 5 conversations, and still we didn't have them deeply. And it wasn't because either of us was necessarily naive, but it was mostly because I was conditioned, and I had confused urgency, readiness, and hope. Hope with preparation. Now, how many of us know hope is not preparation? So I had to sit with the honest question, what would I have done differently if I had known? And so this book represents the answer to that question. The conversations, are the communication, home and family, spirituality, money, sex, and intimacy, mental and emotional health. And also, physical, because, health is broad, but what usually gets us is the mental and emotional health, and also self-awareness and attachment. Not new topics, not earth-shattering science, right? But what this does differently is it refuses to soften them. This is not like soft talk. It tells the truth, at least, as I see it, my truth about why these conversations are important and what they actually cost us if we avoid them, because they always come back. They never go away. What we bury will find a way through the cracks. And so that's what this book is really about. And why I had
Awesome.
to. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, sis, you could have kept all of this to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You could have talked to your girlfriends about this.
Yeah.
Your colleagues maybe about this.
Yes.
But you decided to take the bold step to write a book. Why the book? How did you get here to say, oh no, more people really need to know this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a couple of things. One, it's one of those things that you have in your belly, the thing that you have that just won't go away and it just keeps coming back. And you have the conversations with your family, and you have them with friends, and you have them with passersby, you have them with clients, not a therapist, I'm a coach. You have them with folks, and yet you still have this nagging urge. And then you also have people saying things like, sis, when are you going to write the book? Sis, when are you going to write the book? And I go, wow, there's one in there. There's one in there. And I really wanted to get out. And so timing happened, clarity happened. And sometimes there is something that bursts and you're like, this is an idea whose time has come and I need to get this out. And so when the timing happened, clarity happened, the divorce happened, and I spent years and years accumulating knowledge, professional knowledge, personal experience, talking to people, and it always seems to go there, like the core relationships that we have. All of the other relationships sort of, are tangential to this core relationship that we have that grounds us in that partnership at home. And so I felt like, maybe there are a few folks out there that might be interested in what I have to say, that they might respect a little bit of what I know about, marriage and relationships. And it is not lost upon me that I am someone who's been in a relationship that's failed and is writing a relationship book. So I should say that, right? It is not lost upon me, but I also think that sometimes those who have been through the fire, who've come out not smelling like smoke, have some things to say about relationships. And so that's sort of what compelled me to just get the things out of my gut so that I could sleep.
Yeah.
And so really, that was it. I should also give a nod to years and years ago when I conceptualized this. I drug my then partner into it with me, and we were doing little workshops, and they were real surface because I didn't want to offend them. It was in polite company, the church. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to offend them. And so some things you can say and some things you just cannot, because in polite company, you know what you can say. And so this is the part that I feel like, this is as much as I've got. I'm leaving it all on the table. Maybe some things that offend folks, in the church. And there may be some folks that are like, you know what, we appreciate the honesty. It's just, can I be that? Can I be honest? And also someone who understands being properly churched, And so I just had to do it. I just had to do it. Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful. I have so many more questions, particularly polite company. That's a whole other podcast on its own. But before I invite Candy and Karen to chime in, when you started to promote the book, one thing that intrigued me is that you gave the audience a snippet of what happened. Would you mind giving us a snippet of what you shared on social media to give people who've not seen the promotion of the book some specifics of how we got here?
Yes. So I think what I'm going to do is I am going to look at an excerpt. Is that okay? Can I just
Yes.
read an excerpt? I'm going to find an excerpt here and I'm going to share it with you. So here's a passage from the book. And this is sort of in the intro. I called it marriage when I felt unseen. I called it marriage when I overrode my instinct to keep the peace. I called it marriage when I showed up fully and came home empty. I had no vocabulary for the specific kind of loneliness that lives inside a relationship that looks intact from the outside. I just kept moving. I kept performing. I kept telling myself that if I loved better, if I gave more and asked for less, things would shift. They didn't shift. I did.
Wow.
They didn't shift. I did. Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Candy,
Yeah.
Karen, I'm going to have to leave that right there. You all can chime in.
Oh, good, Karen. Wow, that was definitely a mic drop moment. And already what I'm feeling inside really is sort of how we started the conversation just before press and record.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just the expectancy of the light that is shining through you and through this work and through this thing that's called that was in your gut, to get out.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate, and I can appreciate the import of this moment.
Yes.
It almost feels criminal to talk in this moment. Like that felt like just a sacred moment. Things didn't shift. You shifted. And what I am thinking about, I'm someone has not been married. And at the same time, that description that you just read reminds me of sort of every woman's journey of existing, of reclamation in terms of their identity and their place in the world and how they navigate who they are with the communities that they become a part of, with the roles that women play, And in my work with Bloom Theory Media, we talk about how the center of power really comes back to you knowing who you are, understanding who you are, your connection to God, your connection to purpose, and then how that is used to impact the world, right? We're here for a reason and for a purpose, and how it's used to impact the world. And so in that space, these 7 conversations that you talk about in your book, to strengthen couples, yes.
Yeah.
How do you think those conversations can also be used to strengthen the communities that couples build together? So those circles around that union.
I think one of the things that, one of the big ideas that I hope folks take away when I think about that really important question is that the work that we do in preparation is really me work before the we work. But we're so conditioned to think that we need to get that we work. We got these boxes that we have to check and these markers that we have to hit because that's what society says. As women, we got these clocks that are ticking that tell us what we need to hit at certain times. And so it's almost like determinism versus free will. right? We think that we are doing things based on what our free will is. And really many of us, from themselves, the couples, to the communities that you described, are marching to the beat of drum beats that have been set before us to do the things that we are supposed to do at the appointed time. And we fall in line and we do those things from a position of certainty and not curiosity. And what I've learned this has got to be the 10th iteration of this book that I have written and rewritten in my mind, on paper. I keep regurgitating, redoing, and this isn't right because of the seed of that very question that this relationship that we have with ourselves that we bring, if we even know ourselves by the time we walk into these relationships, these very seminal relationships called marriage. And then we become, when Elder said you become, you have 7 marriages in that one marriage, right? Yeah. Are you ready for the 6th marriage or the 7th marriage? They become, 7 marriages, 7 circles that you've built. And I just really want people to walk in their truth. And it's so easy to say. It's not very easy to do because the truth feels so much more dangerous than the unknown. So much. And then when you ask the hard questions, you risk changing things. It's a risk, right? And I think about how we, speaking of marching to the beat of those drums, when everything is set and the dress is bought, right? And the preacher is booked, right? The venue's booked. Asking those questions feels like it could become catastrophic. Do you want to blow this up? Right? It feels catastrophic. And so, but I submit that the catastrophe on this side is a lot easier to manage than after the government gets involved. The catastrophe on the other side. Because not only does it impact you, we think about these relationships as separate from work, separate from play, and separate from vacay, and separate from our home and family, and separate from finance, and separate from, and they're not. This seminal relationship that we develop with ourselves first, and then this partnership that we build impacts every aspect of your life. Those circles, it impacts every aspect of your life. And yet, particularly on this soil, we treat it as very separate. There's this, and there are all these other things. And that is just not the way life works.
And who tells us, who do we have in our lives to tell us that that's not how life works? That's just sort of an ancillary thought that I had, like who tells us that, right?
Right.
You do, Dr. Sid. Right. This March, what you shared resonates with me so much. I know that March. I'm not married. I've not been married, but I know the March that you're talking about, right? Yes. This set narrative that says you've got to do this by this age, you got to be there at that time, right? That set narrative. And so there is a cost to that march. And I wonder if you would further add some distinguish or pull out some of those costs to the blind march. You mentioned a few. I wondered if there are any other that you wanted to put a finer point on.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is what I refer to as unspoken expectations.
Yes.
Right. Right. Those unspoken expectations, and what they are agreements that nobody agreed to. Nobody agreed to, right? They are just unspoken expectations. And what they do, honestly, they run in the background of every single decision that is made. They run in every conflict, every quiet disappointment that never becomes a real conversation. This is before and after marriage. And what I often say is these are the things that are unsaid. The unsaid, right? They show up as arguments that really are not about the thing that we're arguing about. They almost never are.
Right.
They're almost never about the thing, right? In professional life, speaking of impact, they show up as a resentment. You taking this stuff to work, you mad at the people. They ain't got nothing to do with what's going on there, but you're built, all of that stuff has built up. And what we find is, sorry, my mother's about to walk in. What we find is that the patterns, these are patterns, and they resonate as the same. They show up differently in different spaces, but it's the same patterns because it's our stuff.
Right.
Right. And like you've heard the saying, no matter where you go, there you are.
There you are. Yes.
There you are. And so these are patterns, and we're not just waiting for our partner to disappoint us. We're waiting for ourselves because we know our own patterns, and we just sit in that space and spin in that same space, holding ourselves and our partners to standards that they never knew we had for them.
Wow.
Because they're unspoken. These are
Right.
unspoken, right? And so there's this resonant theme throughout the book that I call the unsaid. Right? It's sort of a framework, the unsaid. And the unsaid can be very, very painful to hold that stuff. And,
Yeah.
it shows up. It shows up in our body. It shows up in our hair, right? My sister would be very proud of me saying that. It shows up in your hair. It shows up in all kinds of ways. But but it remains here and unsaid.
No, that's good. And I imagine during the writing of this book, I'm thinking about what that process must have been like, and I can imagine that it was arduous. That you had to resurface old memories, old emotions. You probably made new connections that you never, that you hadn't previously thought through as thoroughly as what was required to get down on page what you have on paper. And again, thinking about community and the people around you, I bet you have some clearer thoughts now about what you wish your friends and your family or people who are close to you had said to you and your partner, or you or your partner, when you all were thinking about getting together and starting this life together. And I just wonder, either what do you wish would have happened, or folks, here's what you can do to help your loved ones who are considering marriage, knowing what you know now and giving your framework within the 7 conversations.
Oh my gosh, that's so much. That's so good. I tell a story in the book. I call it the granddaddy story. So, God rest his soul. But we got married, and in the house, there were about 100 people. And we did it all on the cheap because we were both clear that we didn't want to spend a lot of money. And I remember that, we did all the things, we did the sugar and the salts and, and the spice for the sweet times and the spicy times and the times that you need to get through. We did that. We had this holy water. It was sprinkle it. We had to sprinkle it, and we had all the things, and we had the stick, and, Reverend Nelson was waving the stick, and it was just really, really just a whole thing. It was quite the production. Okay. It's very, very, very nicely done.
We love a production.
We love a production. We love a good production. And so, and then, so my grandfather gave me away because my father was in a nursing facility, and could not travel in Florida. And we got married in DC. And I just remember I'm saying about 6 months. Time has gotten really weird. So I'm trying to, but about maybe 6 months, maybe 6 weeks. I don't remember, but I do remember how I felt when my grandfather said to me, in my house, "Are you sure
Wow.
I was like, what did you just say? What did you just say, Benjamin? Because the time to have asked me that would have been 6 months earlier. Because no one ever asked me.
Wow.
Nobody that I really deeply respected. I'm not talking about the pleasantries, but the
Right.
way that he asked was, he had this way about him. Grandfathers with very few words. He was a farmer, so he didn't have a lot of words. His hands and the soil were his way of communicating. And so when he cocked his head to the side and said, "Are you sure?" I know he was saying more. He was asking me something, the things unsaid.
Right. Things
Were
unsaid.
Were showing up in that space. He had something to say. And the way he wanted to communicate it without being disruptive and without being impolite. He said, "Are you sure?" Right? The other thing that happened in the writing of the book is, every time I would just say to people in community, I'm writing this book, and I was saying it out loud for, maybe more than a year. Just actually, it's more like a 10-year project. But the closer I got to it, the more I would talk about it. And every single time I would have a sister, mostly, right? Because my clients are mostly sisters and friends. And they would tell me a gut-wrenching story. I mean, some of them were so gut-wrenching. And it reminded me that so many of us are going through struggles and we're not talking about them. And they felt, because I was opening this up, that they had permission. And it was so effusive. They were just coming out the gate with, "Oh, let me tell you about my conversation when it comes down to a family or an in-law issue that I have that has really gutted me, or a financial situation, or the expectations that I had of my partner, and never really said them clearly and explicitly. And he gutted me with the way, and it just keeps happening. And countless. And what it said to me is, one, I do have something to say, and giving the permission, the few people that happen to be in front of me, permission to just be, to sit and to listen without judgment and without memory.
Yeah.
That you can be that sister, and I can love you and not judge you about how you should have known, and why didn't you, and do you mean to tell me, and how long did it, and all of the things that helped me know that, one, was what I was doing was not a futile effort, because it was going to help somebody who I could not just sit in front of. And this is my way of doing that.
Yeah. This is so good. So good. And even in the last examples that you use, I hearing in my head, tale as old as time, that this is not a one-off. This is not one person's experience tucked away in a corner, but a common experience.
Absolutely. It is a common experience. And actually, part of what in this next iteration, as I'm writing this, and I just finished this next iteration that has really, I hope, will honor Black women, is I've talked about our emotional history on the soil and what that means, and the things that we bring into relationships that are unsaid based on what we have come through. You don't just leave it. It doesn't drop off, right? It does not drop off. When I think about the bodies of Black women, right? Either over-sexualized or repressed, one or the other. We can't live in the gray. we're either over-sexualized or we're repressed and don't date till we're 18, 19 years old. And we don't forget, we don't get permission to talk about pleasure and what that means and how to experience it and the fullness of it because of shame and all of the things that come with that. We're not allowed to do that, right? And so I put some historical context about what that means and how that shows up in our bodies and what we bring before we have fully become who we're going to become, just for a time such as that, when we are walking down that aisle, just for that. Like, we're not going to be the person that we're going to be at 55 or 60, but just our 30-year-old selves. Who are we in those spaces? Have we taken time to figure out who that person is and what that person needs, desires, deserves in all of its fullness without checking off everybody else's box? And without the shame, the historical shame that has been laid at our feet, the lack of protection that Black women on this soil have not been afforded. We have not. We have been left out there to dry, to hurt, to bleed in ways that our partners can't always hold. They don't understand it. And we understand why they don't understand it, because no fault of theirs, they were ripped away. What do we think? That genetic memory has gone?
Right.
It is, right? It has come through the birth canal as trauma. And we're all trying to navigate, what in the heck does this mean? Wouldn't it be beautiful if we could just talk about that on the other side of the aisle?
This is so powerful. I already know there's a part 2 coming. Dr. Johnette, you have unmuted yourself.
Speaking of part 2, Sislena, listen, sis, I know you're revising and redoing, but Holy Spirit moment, this is not one book, love. It's not one book. I'm going to just leave it there. It's not one book. So as you're revising, I want to sisterly say to you, the book 1 is done.
It is.
There are other books. As a woman having been married 24 years, I mean, some of the stuff you're tapping on is like, whoa, wait a minute, But this is a season, just key words that you've just said. God is calling us to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's honest, and it takes bravery and boldness to do that. And yes, the polite company, the offense, and no, we don't want to hurt people, but we're hurting people by not saying what needs to be said because it's showing up. We're dying because we're not telling the truth. We're dying because we want to keep our stuff intact, but willing to let another sister die because we ain't told the truth. To even know, girl, me too. I'm here too. It happened to me too.
Yeah.
We're not talking enough. And and I'm so excited about this book because we are opening doors. Even this podcast are opening doors for other women to tell their stories so that you know that you're not out here alone.
Absolutely.
And I'll say for the church, I love God, love the church, but y'all, we sitting in church lying. Yeah. How you going to serve and worship God in real spirit and truth when you lying about your marriage? Come on. And you're allowing other people to go through like over and over and over again, and you think that's pleasing to the Lord? I'm done.
I think she needs to unmute again.
Drop the mic and mute it. Can we?
Oh my God. That's right. No, absolutely. And it reminds me of a piece in here where I talk about the body and I talk about Howard Thurman, where he talks about the body and oppression. And I liken that to what we sort of, how we deal with our interior life and our capacity to believe, I'm going to say as women, right? That we are worthy, and specifically as Black women, that we are worthy of amazing love, not just half-stepping love, like amazing love, safety. We deserve to believe that we belong wherever we find ourselves. And I think about that in the context of preparation. We deserve everything. We do. Why is that too much? Why can't our partners make us feel like we deserve it all? And we go to the altar carrying all these wounds, believing that we deserve, a little something, something. Because we're wounded, and so are they. And our wounds tell us that we're not enough to ask for it all. That wanting is dangerous for us. It's about reclaiming our interior, who we are as women, what we deserve, and upon what real spiritual partnership is built. How do we do that on that side of the aisle? That's really, it excites me because that's the work. It's not fun necessarily, but imagine how many marriages could just be healthier if those icky conversations were had on this side. The muscles that we could exercise, the silence that would be broken, right? As we walk around silent, the uncertainty being washed away because now the expectations are clear. But we're afraid to speak what we need because we have been conditioned to say, you are not allowed. Your words don't really matter. We've been conditioned. We don't, no one has to do anything, and that exists. And so we settle, or we allow, and we sit in silence, and we don't say what we need. We don't say what we want. What if we have what we need, but we want more? What about that? Are we allowed to do that? I think we are. We don't know because we haven't exercised those muscles. We haven't done that.
Well, I must say she has me speechless. But I like when the Holy Spirit has me to pause, because Johnette kind of had me at a different spot in the agenda. And I knew in that moment, because you brought us into a very sacred moment when you read the book. You brought us into a very, very sacred moment. And at that moment, the Holy Spirit was truly intense. But we couldn't stay there in that moment because of what you had to say, what Karen helped us to surface for you to have the wherewithal to say all that you said. And I just sat there. It was like, maybe I should have. No, it was in the order that it was supposed to be, because we needed to understand the content of not only the book, but what all you are bringing to the table, and that has gone into the book thus far. And there's so much more. Because if we, because one of the things that I wrote before we started, because you said a lot about those polite conversations and what you can and cannot say, because church has told you that once marriage is spoken, then ducks have to fall in the row. It's not that you go back and say, well, what if, or can I do this, or should I do that? Because it's set in motion.
Right.
And so then you buy the dress and the flowers, and the proposal happens, and then everything else just kind of
Coasting.
It just goes.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel like you're at a point of no return, because like your granddad said, you actually do that now?
Yeah, I mean that.
It's like, wait.
Yeah.
But what I had written was, people are so reluctant, I said, to dissolve or divorce, especially as believers, because we know that the Lord brought us together. But then the Holy Spirit comes back and says, something's not quite right. And I think he attempts to tell us on that side of the aisle. Because when the proposal and the marriage process has started, we just flow with it. We don't speak to us and say, yeah, you might have read it a little wrong. You might not have read it completely, but now you're in love and you're going to get married, and so the Holy Spirit at that point doesn't have his place. He's his footing.
That's
and
great.
I'm going to stop because I won't go into my question, because I don't know if Johnette wants to kind of pull it so that Karen can leave and we can take up the conversation versus continuing without her. What's interesting on the other side, when you're in it all the way, well, two things real quick I want to say. One is that it's interesting that we're taught that marriage is 50-50, which it is not. Marriage is supposed to be 100-100. But somewhere in the equation, in the math, the woman ends up trying to make up the difference. And that can be very, very painful, because then the partner doesn't have to carry his 100 if we're trying to be 100 plus.
What you're speaking of is absolutely on point and really powerful. I think about it in the context of wholeness. I mean, I talk a little bit about spirituality and wholeness in the book, and I'm hearkening back to what Johnette said about this is book one, and maybe it is a series. I don't know. Maybe it is a series that I can break them all down, because really these are it's a couple hundred pages of micro books where I just give a little bit. But if you really want to go deep and talk about wholeness, and wholeness is 100, right? Wholeness is 100%, and wholeness is not the absence, right, of wounds. Right? It is the honest acknowledgement that there's anything it's the honest acknowledgement that they exist.
Yes.
Right? Because there will be times when I will not have 100%. And that's when I'm going to need my partner to carry me and to help me. I need you to be able to do that, right? Not even to, I don't even know. I don't really think about it in terms of numbers, but just, can you be there when I need you? Can you intuit my needs? Can you see that I'm bleeding without the blood dropping on the floor? Can you tell when things are just off a bit? Do you know that about me? Can you see that beforehand, before I walk down the aisle? This is where the work happens. Can you see those things about me? Are you willing to say them out loud? Right? The couples that I think who build something real are not the ones who arrive without baggage. We all have baggage. We show up with our past relationships. We show up with our family of origin stuff. We show up with our debt, and we show up with our this, and we show up with all these things, student loans, whatever. And it's not bad. That that is not it. It's not the issue. It's, what are we willing to unpack in front of each other? Really willing to unpack, to say, this is what happened to me. Here is how it shaped who I am. And here is what I need from you as a result of who I am, who I've been, who this has shaped me to be, right? I am coming with all of my vulnerability and all of my weakness. And it is the beginning. That is the beginning of intimacy.
Absolutely.
That is the beginning of intimacy. It starts off really uncomfortable because truth, real truth, not politeness, is uncomfortable. We do not want to, once the dress is ordered, we do not want to be uncomfortable. And so I know from friends, I can think back 30 years, 20 years, friends who have said to me, sis, I knew I was about 75% there. I knew that I probably should have paused. I knew it. I knew that I wanted to, I really, it's not that I didn't love him. It's not that, but I knew I was about, 80%. But I did it because I needed to perform. And the performance was about to happen. And I did not have the courage. I did not have the wherewithal. I did not have the language. I didn't have it. I didn't have the examples of other women who had said, you know what, I'm gonna love you. And we're gonna keep dating for a season, just for a season, so that I could show up in more strength and not with this much weakness. Just a little bit longer, not because of the regularity, what did Reverend Willie F. Wilson say? Not because of the idea that I could have regular sex without shame and guilt. So we let it pass. We let it go. Not knowing, we knew. Not knowing, we knew. Not knowing, we knew that it deserved a conversation. The temporary discomfort on this side, just temporary discomfort on this side, is worth it. And that is what I want sisters to know.
Oh my God, that is huge. That is huge because, and you said it so many times, it's that unrealistic expectation. You go in expecting that they're capable of delivering what you need and you want. Mm-hmm. And you make that assumption because you haven't told them what that is.
Right. And we say we're fine. Yeah. I mean, Candy, think about this. We've even been conditioned to say, if somebody says, hey, how you doing? What do we say?
Fine.
Lies. We ain't fine. But we have so that little tiny example, imagine that for the biggest decision, the most consequential. One of the most consequential, I think it is the most consequential. I mean, maybe, you might say giving your life to God or Christ or whatever your path may be is the most consequential. But maybe after that, the most consequential decision, we still say, fine. Because we've been conditioned to say fine. And so we keep it moving and we let things pass that deserve a conversation and we sit in silence and we don't have them. We leave curiosity at the door for certainty. We're like, yeah, we can fix it on the other side. We're going to talk about it. We're going to work this out. It's a little, but that's really not what happens. It's never how it happens. And I have talked to so many people who have said they knew. Dearest friends, who have said, I knew, and I did it anyway. And 11 years later, and 15 years later, or 20 years later, here's what we're doing. This is what we're doing. And so, yeah, I'm not happy, but this is what we're doing. Not everybody. So I want to make sure that I'm clear about that. This is not, nothing I'm saying is a absolution, but so many. And this book really is about for those who want to have the permission to pause, that they know that it's okay that they are okay with pausing, that they could separate. There's a chapter in there that talks about separating the party from the legal document signing. And nobody has to know. Nobody has to know. But if you're not sure, have the celebration if you want to have the celebration, right? Do whatever it is that you need to do. But once you become legally entangled, it's a whole nother level. And honestly, I didn't know that. I did not know that they were separate. I thought that once you did the ceremony, that was it. I didn't make the connection that you could go through the ceremony if it means that much to you and still be uncertain. You still give yourself permission to say, and I'm not sure. I just need a little bit more time to make sure that I'm sure, because my peace is more important than the performance. And so, yeah, sorry, Candy.
No. I'm sorry if I cut you, but I think what happens is we're not willing to have those conversations at the front end. We're still trying to make it easy together, and marriage becomes the ultimate goal. So you don't want to have the hard conversations. You don't want to really know the information. You know, that he may have a lot of baggage that he doesn't know how to process. And you can't help him process it. You think you can, right?
You cannot.
You cannot help him process it.
You cannot. You cannot. Yeah. And it's interesting because if you ask yourself, I mean, one of the things that kind of came up for me in writing this book is the question, if this person stayed exactly as they are today.
Oh.
Exactly. No growth, no change. You too, right? No becoming the version that you want them to be, right? Could you live in peace with that, right? Could you live in peace? Not live in hope, not live in faith, but peace. Could you live like that? Yes. Sometimes just, as a coach, one of the things we talk about is life is about asking the right questions, right? If you ask yourself that question and the answer is yes, if this person stayed exactly the way they are on a trajectory, I get that everybody shifts and changes. But could you live with yourself knowing that what you get right now is it? This is it. Is that enough? Enoughness, right? We've heard about enoughness. Is that going to be enough for you? Because if it's not, you are going to have an uncomfortable reality. And it's going to happen quick.
For sure. Johnette's come off of Dr. Come off of mute, but it's so true. Because, how many of us were kind of not even taught, you were led to believe that once you get married, they'll change. If they're willing to marry you, and if that's all the eggs are in that basket, if they're willing to marry you, then of course, over time, he'll change because he was willing to propose, and we're going to be married. And there's no doubt in my mind that things will change, and they don't.
Yeah. Dr. Sis, this conversation is so rich. Everything that you have said really has covered every question that we had for you. And so I'm really thrilled about that. And we could talk several more hours about this. But as we move to a close, is a couple of things that I want to highlight. But if you would give us some closing words on this. Sure. There are so many women looking for love, and they are getting advice, rules, or whatever, particularly the younger ones from social media, do this, do that. And it's so restrictive and scripted, right? But I think the important thing, the takeaway And for women to really hear, we have a tendency to look at him. He's not, he's this, he won't. It starts here. It starts with you. If he's not showing up the way you need him or want him to show up, did you do enough of the vetting process? All of the things that we talked about. But in order to vet, you have to know what you want, what you're looking for, and admit to yourself that it's okay to want these things. Now, we are not talking about a perfect man.
No.
Which some women can walk away. Well, he's got to be 6 foot. He got this. Trust and believe. After you've been married long enough, you know that height is the doesn't even necessarily make the list. However, we have our physical preferences. But the bottom line is there's so much more to it. And many times, so not only is it not perfection, but loving yourself enough to know that you don't get married just because he asked. Some people follow, well, he asked. And so of the performance, well, I have to say yes.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. Or saying yes because I don't think anybody else is going to ask.
Yes.
All of those things. But one thing I was determined to do with my daughter, who's now 18, is to begin I know.
What?
It's to be.
When did that happen?
Look, when did it happen?
Okay.
But to begin talking to her about my life and giving her age-appropriate revelations of things that I experienced, what I thought I understood, what I didn't know then that I know now. And I remember having a conversation with her, asking her, what does she want in a relationship? Because I did not want, I'm going to be transparent, I did not want her to necessarily, at least not all of it, to model her relationships off of me and my husband's relationship. For instance, his love language, acts of service. Mine are quality time, words of affirmation, all of that touchy-feely stuff. She's somewhere in between. But I wanted her to think for herself, what does she want? What aspect, if we're the model, does she like? And what aspect does she kind of do without? But to be intentional about thinking through that. And so we've done that age appropriately. And this last conversation before she prepares to go to college was the last bucket where I pulled out pictures, I pulled out letters, cards from the past to talk with her about the complexities of these relationships, why I entered into certain relationships. Just honest.
Okay.
So she's not out here like prey. I cannot send you from the nest to be anybody can just swoop and pluck.
Yeah.
And I have to do that because nobody had anything to share with me other than what not to do. Or if when I was preparing to get married, asking for it, no one had just nothing good to give. What is that?
Yeah.
Then why do it if you have nothing good to say about it?
Yeah.
And also coming from a home where the parents were not solid. So no good models. No good models. But again, from a woman's perspective, wanting to give her everything, not hiding, even the ugly stuff that I would care not to talk about, but I'm going to tell you so that you can break this, will make good choices for yourself, and you can go on to share that with whatever children you may decide to have. That's a long way of asking you if you would provide some insight about how women can move forward more intentionally as we navigate romantic relationships and other relationships. One of the things I've been talking about on the professional end is that we, as you already talked about, we separate. This is personal, this is professional. No, ma'am, no, sir. It all shows up everywhere.
Yes.
And one of the main things that I think keeps professional women back from pursuing more, I've met with various levels, high-ranking folks, big salaries. The big thing is still, I'm not enough. And I say the number one thing holding professional women back is shame. That shame is carried over from wherever it came from, and it's sitting right in your corporate job lap, and you cannot show up as you're supposed to show up. So as we close out, any things that women need to think about as they move forward in relationships or otherwise, that you can offer to them through this experience that will help them to show up.
Yes.
As children of God, boldly, wonderfully, powerfully, intentionally made to be the women that we are supposed to be.
Absolutely. Wow. I feel like I want to end there. That is, thank you so much for that question, but also thank you for your honesty. So powerful. Some of the best writing that I did in that was when I was able to share from some of the personal stories. I would say really a couple of things. Everything right now is age appropriate for your daughter at 18, getting ready to go off to school. Leave no stone unturned, because that is your precious cargo. And she deserves everything that you have, every lesson, because that which you don't give her, she will get. Somebody will be ready to teach her those things, right? I'm saying this as a mom of 3 boys that we don't teach. So leave no stone unturned. Give her all the stuff that you have at this point, but as she embarks upon what it means to be a young woman of God out there. And the most important relationship, I would say, if I had a daughter, and I've definitely said to my sons, is the relationship that you have with yourself. It feels really trite, but trusting your gut. There is a connection between the mind and the gut, the brain and the gut, the brain-gut connection. You guys can look it up. And that is where the intuition, the God, the spirit lives. And she will, the more she hones that intuition, that Holy Spirit, that gut brain, the more she practices hearing what that says to her, the better decisions she will make. It will not fail. It will not fail. It will always warn you. The red flags are always pink first. They are always there. It is the number one piece of advice that I share when I think about young folks. Trust your gut. That is where the spirit lives. And it just has to be off a bit for you to engage in curiosity and to put a pause on certainty. You don't have to be certain about something. You can pause, and that does not mean fear. And that is why trusting your intuition is a practice, because it is not about the guidance of feeling the fear and walking into it anyway, because that we need to do. But the practice of hearing the Holy Spirit and hearing the intuition is a practice, because it's where your discernment is built. And when a predator shows up, when it is really sharp, you will know they don't even have to open their mouths. You will exit stage left, because your intuition, where the Holy Spirit lives and resides and is there to protect you, will just go, just a bit. And then it will turn it up a notch if you don't ignore, and it'll be like, ignore that. And that's when you then, you turn it all the way up. There is a story in the book that I talk about. It's called, it's really odd because it's called The Toilet Story. And this is a story about a $436 pull chain toilet. And this toilet was a toilet that my then fiance didn't have enough money to buy. And so in our dating period, they said, can you buy this toilet for me? And it seemed really simple. And I thought, this is odd. Just a little, right? Anyway, the moral of the story is God can even speak in a flush. Because it was foreboding. It was very foreboding. Every time that toilet flushed, I thought about the But there's a whole passage in the book that talks about why and how to sharpen. And there are ways you can sharpen that intuition and that gut-brain connection. You can practice on little things, right? Your daughter can practice on little things. Other women can practice on little things that feel inconsequential. How many of you know they are not inconsequential? That is where you are sharpening. That is where you are getting it. You are getting your stripes. You are getting it in. You are getting in you are practicing. You are taking your licks so that when you need it, you get the flush right away. And too many of us don't know that. We're not told, trust your gut, baby. Trust your gut. It is not going to lead you. It is just not going to. I have never seen it, right? The Bible would say, I've never seen the righteous forsaken or the seed begging bread. In here is what it is. It will not lead you wrong. And so as you think about what to tell your daughter, she's got the Eve gene. She's got the Eve gene. She is powerful. She is the embodiment of so many beautiful women, not the least of which is a mother that has come before her and has taken stripes that she does not have to take, has walked paths that she does not have to walk, not because that she can't handle them, but because you've done it. And these are lessons that she does not have to learn because you have taken those lessons for her. These are things that I wish for her and for every woman who is willing to listen. Because that Eve gene is so powerful that we are the original women. Everything comes through us. The power that along with this God energy means that she deserves pleasure safely. She deserves love, protection. She deserves to belong at every table she finds herself. Every table. No table is too big. No community in which she finds herself is too important. Every opportunity and every door that opens, she is to sit up straight, back squared, and walk through that because that way has been made for her. And every other woman who will grab hold of it and own that because they have trusted their gut enough to know when that door is theirs to open. And I am going to end and honor your time with a closing passage. This is the end of the book. And this is about partnership. So it says, so before you say I do, pause for a moment. Look at the person beside you. Really look. Notice the way the light catches their face, the small scar above their eyebrow that they got as a child, the way their hands rest in their lap, the rise and fall of their breathing. This person, with all their complexity and contradiction, their strengths and their stumbles, is choosing you, and you are choosing them. Smile if you can. Reach for the hand if it feels right, and ask one more question. Because sometimes the difference between a marriage that quietly fades and one that deepens over time is not luck. It's the willingness to keep talking, to keep listening, to keep laughing, and to keep choosing each other again and again and again.
Wow, Dr. Sis, thank you. Thank you. We feel all of that. We appreciate your boldness, your transparency, your sisterhood. We want you to know that we are walking lockstep with you to get this book out into every hand possible. In fact, whoever's watching, please use the QR code now so that you can pre-order your copy of this incredible book. It is a must-have. It should be in every household, every sister circle, every church meeting, every Bible study, every podcast, every television show, all of it. And so we thank you, sis, and we are praying for you that whatever angst, discomfort, people being offended, whatever the case may be, that the Holy Spirit would step right in and direct your path. And that you not, if you feel anything, is this version of the book good enough? That God will just say, sis, I got this.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. So we love you. Feel free to come back anytime. You all, Dr. Sislena Grocer Ledbetter, the book, The 7 Conversations That You Must Have Before You Say I Do. Thank you again so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. In good fashion. My mother's phone's ringing.
Bye-bye.
Love you.
Yeah.